Здраво на сите, добро вечер. Фала ви што дојдовте на предавањето на разговорот со Даниела Бергер Прадо, кураторка во Музеот на Солидарноста Салвадор Алленде од Сантиаго де Чиле. За да може нашата гостинка да не разбере, ќе продолжам понатаму на англиски, несиното предавање ќе биде на англиски и ќе ве замолам и да имате прашања и коментари на крајот од овој разговор да ги поставите на англиски јазик. So good evening. Thank you for finding time to be with us tonight for the talk with Daniela Berger Prado, curator at the Museum of Solidaridad Salvador Allende of Santiago de Chile. She's proposing an interesting talk tonight with an interesting, intriguing title: Can a museum be a table or a tree? We invited Daniela for many reasons, but I'm going to mention maybe only two now tonight. First of all, it's because the Museum of Solidarity, Museo de la Solidaridad Salvador Allende from Chile, has a lot of connections, or maybe similarities, maybe it's the proper word, with our museum, the Museum of Contemporary Art of Skopje, because both of the museums have a collection that's based on donations from artists from all around the world. And they're somehow, both of them are belonging to the socialist idea of building a strong museum made of works from different artists from all around the world. But also she's part of this series of lectures because we are announcing an exhibition that's going to happen on the 28th of November this year, that's based on the works from our collection and also artists from contemporary artists from all around the world. This is a collectively curated exhibition that's going to open on 28th of November. And Daniela is going to be also contributing to the next year's continuation or sequel of this exhibition. I'm not going to say a lot. Maybe I'm going to leave the floor to you, Daniela, now. I've mentioned that you basically are working as a curator of exhibitions and auto coordination of programs in the museum, but also you're teaching at the University Alberto Hurtado.
Alberto
Hurtado.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, in Santiago de Chile. Yeah. So I'm going to stop here. Daniela, please, the floor is yours. Thank you for being with us.
Dobro večer, good afternoon, or maybe good night here. Buenas noches. Thank you for being here. Fala, everybody. As Ivana just briefly introduced me, I think I'm just going to rush into the presentation. Thank you, Ivana, for the nice foreword, and thank you all for being here. And I want to also introduce our common friend, Bojana Piškur, who is, I would say, pretty much responsible for many connections. So can a museum be a table or a tree? I'm sorry if this sound of the movement of the microphone, is it okay if I move it? Okay. So this is the Museum of Solidarity of Salvador Allende in Santiago de Chile, the Museo de la Solidaridad, which is a very non-contemporary easy house. It is a bourgeois house of a Belgian iron company family, Amadeo Heidemans. And as you see, it was built in Gothic Belgian architecture style, which has absolutely nothing to do with the Santiago architecture of the city. And it's quite interesting because it includes the sort of metal pins that were awaiting for a snow that unfortunately never came to Santiago. It's very elegant and also very complicated but it's also very beautiful. And as I was saying to some of you yesterday, we have this garden that I'm gonna talk a little bit about now. Well, this is the house that gives our space now to this international artistic project that was this museum since it was invented as an idea in 1971, allowing for the world in a way to direct the gaze for artists and intellectuals to look at the little country in the south as one of the most really utopian and ambitious endeavors of social transformation that was carried out at the time in Latin America. And we believe it also allowed us to create, at least in the region at the time, a new relational, and the word relational is important, model between art, its creators, the artists, and the public of the museum, based on the idea of solidarity of artists towards the people of Chile, artists of the most diverse origins, with the people of Chile who were undergoing a social transformation, What am I talking about? Of course, is the Unidad Popular, the government of President Salvador Allende, the popular unity, as a rough translation. The context is called Operation Truth, Operación Verdad, which at first we thought it was a very original idea of Salvador Allende, but after some research and some conversations, of course, historians gossip, we found out that actually Salvador Allende had copied it from Fidel Castro, no less. But Fidel Castro had done it differently. Fidel Castro, and maybe it's not original from him also, I'm leaving the question as well, he invited journalists to Cuba to see the actual, social transformations in a more of a sort of, if I can say, publishing or marketing thing. This was more of a cultural focused gesture of Salvador Allende to invite big names, let's say, of the world of culture from all over the world, politicians, of course, from the left, writers, senators, painters, artists, to Chile to sort of respond and to see what was actually happening, rather than following the bad news that was, the United States, of course, was spreading all around the world, first from Cuba, after 59, and then from all this sort of socialist axis that formed in Central and South America. So the Operation Truth was very relevant for the context, and inviting, in this context, the Brazilian art critic Mario Pedrosa, who was in exile in Chile from the Brazilian dictatorship, which was very strong, it was very rough. A lot of people fled Brazil. Inviting him was actually very key to the success of the museum, if I can say. In this way, MSSA was emerging, we call MSSA today, as a museum of modern and experimental art, in the ways that Salvador Allende envisioned already in his presidential campaign of '69, with initiatives such as El Pueblo Tiene Arte con Allende, People Have Art with Allende, or El Tren de la Cultura, Train of Culture, in which you would bring culture and arts all around the country, which is something that is very difficult because Chile, you might not know, is a very centralized country. It's very long and narrow as a belt, but the city of Santiago kind of holds the majority of the population, and at the time, surely was definitely more centralized than today. So Mario Pedrosa led this experimentality. He had been very key in figures of Brazil and their development of works of art, such as Ligia Clark, Ligia Pape, Eloy Tisica. So the experimentality, the social transformation of this social art, right, that would be becoming with the meaning, with the people, with society, was very relevant to the pieces of work that they sort of started digging for or searching for or inviting people to donate to. So they first invited only works by foreign artists. This is, it's important, and also it's kind of interesting as well. It's very unique. They wouldn't want works from Chile at the time because they wanted these works to be to the people of Chile. And this is Salvador Allende's one of the initial words of the first speeches of the museum was, we want this museum to be for the working women, for the working men, for the miners. We want it to be in every corner of the country. Like, this was a museum for the people, not for the elites, not for the first world, not a mausoleum. It would be a museum with live, with a live museum. That's what I was trying to convene. So CISAC, an international committee of artistic solidarity with Chile, was funded. So we had the great opportunity to come with important names as Julio Carlo Argan, Jean Marie, who at the moment was the director of the Museum of Modern Art in Paris, Dor Ashton, a very relevant, prominent critic of New York, Danilo Treyes, a filmmaker from Uruguay, Eddie de Wilde, who at the time was the director of the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam, Harald Ziem, and of course you probably know of him, Louis Aragorn, among many other relevant names, were the members of this committee. And as Ivana was very good saying, there is a connection in the way that the donations were made, because there was sort of the figure of the ambassadors in a way. Each of them were asking for donations of their own countries. So artists from, let's say, the Netherlands would donate through, of course, Eddy de Wilde, and Jean Lemarie, of course, would be part of the French sort of selection committee, and so forth and so on. So the international resonance of this call to join in solidarity with Chile through art had an exceptional return. In less than 2 years, actually in a year and a half, more than 650 works donated by Mexico, France, Cuba, Spain, Uruguay, Ecuador, Bulgaria, United States, Argentina, and Switzerland arrived, while the delivery of additional works from Japan and the United Kingdom was expected. The first works arrived while the museum still had no name. Museo de la Solidaridad, we call this the first phase, and I'm showing you over here the first catalog, which I think, of course, you would recognize the work of Jean Miro on the left. He specially made this painting for the museum. And of course, the press of that day, of 17th of May, 1972, about that museum over there, which is a borrowed museum, is a museum of contemporary art, not our house or our museum in any case. They said that we opened the museum with Miro painting nearly wet. So really just painted fresh for us. So it's quite epic and quite lyric, and I think it was quite an important gesture. He then donated another work, a much darker work, I would say, and we can speak about that later, because he donated it after the coup d'etat of 1973. So clearly speaking about the military and civil, not only military, I need to clarify that, dictatorship the country went through. The center is part of the Salvador Allende's first speech in the museum. And as I said, the right is the first, well, let's say the first venue of the museum, the first house, the Parthenon, the Chilean Parthenon, in the center of a beautiful park called Quinta Normal. That was the first exhibition. So we didn't manage to have our own headquarters or legal personalities or legal figure before the coup, because the enthusiasm and the solidarity of artists of all the world was quite faster than the reaction capacity of the organizers. And the internal political instability that happened, well, really since the beginning of Salvador Allende's government, on purpose by different groups, was also key in preventing the museum for meeting the requirements associated with all what it is, formal constitution of a museum. So from the beginning, the collection was defined as an international one, and it connected works from Latin America because we received various different donations, abundant donations from Latin American countries, mainly I would say Argentina, Colombia, Uruguay, Mexico, Mexico being the first and biggest one, I would say. So this is a very brief summary of our collection that today comprises more than 3,150 pieces, because it's changed since I made this presentation. We are meeting probably 3 to 4 times a year to select more donations. So the first period we call the Solidarity period. It was the first reaction from 1971 to the coup d'etat in 73. The second period we call the Resistance period, the MIRSA. So the summary of the words, Museo International Museum of Resistance Salvador Allende, which is a museum with no homes. I think we've discussed this with some of us here in the room, some colleagues, Vladimir today. The museum was a moving museum. Actually, it was moving exhibitions around the world, Europe, but also in Cuba. I will show a map that explains it better afterwards. And then that is from 1975 till 1990. And then the final Museo de la Solidaridad, it's a difficult word, even in Spanish it's difficult. Salvador Allende, it's 1,120 works from 91, which is the recovery of democracy till the present. So, So I just wanted to read a little quote from Salvador Allende describing this project. They said, I was saying that it connected works from Latin America to Europe at the service, and it's a quote, of the Chilean public, with the goal of generating a key cultural pole for the entire region. Very ambitious text. They, the artists, he said, also aspire not to be confined to the metropolitan area of the rich and advanced countries of the Northwestern Hemisphere, but to reach deep into the great underprivileged areas of the Third World. Chile is representative of this entire underdeveloped world, and it's in its sacred revolution against submission it intends to offer the best conditions to become an authentic cultural center at the service, again, of its people and the sister nations of Latin America. And I know it sounds epic and I know it sounds lyric, but also looking at what we've been discussing these last days with my colleagues, I think it also sounds very potential today to apply it. Maybe there are some words that I would take out, but there are some words that are getting a new meaning today, to me at least, and it will be maybe interesting to think about them. So if you look, the first donations came from different parts of the world, and you will see on the right side that we have lost some donations. And from the moment that we did this presentation a few months and years ago, it's a combination, we found some of the works of of Switzerland and of Japan, and we know of some works of the UK. What happened? For example, let's say, we're talking about 71 and 73 here. So the works of the UK were stopped. They were donating through the embassy, the Chilean embassy in London. And when they heard about the coup d'etat, the works were in the embassy. So the artists were really angry and of course against the dictatorship. So they went to the embassy and they retired the works, which I say is it's very obvious. It's very logic. The Japan were lost. We haven't found all the donation group. Romania, we know that there was a problem with the costs of the customs services. And Switzerland, they were also lost, but we recovered some of them looking at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs archives and finding some of them also in museums in Chile, hidden or, protected maybe through the dictatorship's time, which is also something that happened. The works disappeared, such as the bodies disappeared, the bodies of the people. The works were hidden, the works were destroyed, the works were robbed. Some of them, we presume, are in military houses today. We know for sure that some of them were being sold and distributed. Many realities. And just to show you a couple of works of this sort of first period, big names, or maybe names for Latin America, of course, Carlos Cruz Diez. And now you're going to start and see what I mean when we have sister artists, Amala Nieto from Uruguay, Victor Vasarely, Joaquín Torres Garcia, which is a very important name for the initial modernism in South America, especially the Southern Cone, I would say. Lesbia Dubois from Cuba, Jean Miro, of course, Noemi Gerstein, and many others. And then I'm just going to show this very important work of Frank Stella, not because it's a beautiful seminal piece of work, not because it's called Isfahan, a city of Iran, and today that somehow strikes me as art always being connected to reality and what's happening, not only because we restored it, but because this work also represents the history in Chile. This work was, when the coup d'etat came, this work was hidden. We don't know very much. There different theories, but it was hidden in the storages of the Museum of Contemporary Art, a museum that is also like our brother museum in a way. We have many names in common and stuff. And so it was taken off its, how do you say, what's the word? I forgot it. The marco, Daniela, come on. It was taken off its structure, let's say. Mm-hmm. It was taken off, it was folded. And you know what folding, painting like this, when it was 10 centimeters almost, it was 8 centimeters thick, because it belongs to a period when really Frank Stella was about to jump into, industrial volumes and huge paintings with volume into a much more experimental art. It's the series Protractor. So it was folded, it was really hidden, almost destroyed, very damaged, all the colors. Some of them are really fluorescent, very, very vibrant. And with the Getty Foundation, we worked on this piece for 5 years after we found it. And Claudia Saldivar, the director of the museum, she did her dissertation on this collection. She knew, she heard, she started looking for files, for archives, and then she entered the storage, and she knew that there was a Frank Stella somewhere, and she found this piece, and this piece, was very affected by the coup d'etat. I mean, the piece was almost broken, was marked as the country's history, and the people are marked with this wound and will be forever. And of course, you here in this context know about this. So restoring it was also a very important and symbolic gesture for us. And because it was such a exhausting process of 5 years, we're now going to keep it in exhibition for the next 5. And also it's huge, it's recovered, it's real size, it's real frame. And now that was the word I was looking for. And now it's there accompanying us. Also because to put it down, we need to kind of take a window and take a balcony and take a part of the wall. It's really big. So this polyphonic participation of artists would be very furtherly amplified on the second period, the resistance period. So after the coup d'etat of 1973, the museum reinvented itself. And you see that it's not immediately, of course. All of them, Mario Pedrosa, Jose Balmes, a lot of Latin American artists were exiled, mainly to Paris, mainly to France, some also to Spain. And Miria Contreras, former secretary and collaborator, very close to Salvador Allende, she went to Cuba. So if you see in the map, those 2 dots in red are the Central Secretariat of Committee of the Resistance of the Museum. So they were actually, they continued this job, this work of asking for donations, and they were collecting these new collections, moving exhibitions in these 2 sort of poles of operation. One in Europe, which was very helpful, in France, and one in Cuba, receiving works from all over the world. You can see from Colombia, of course, from Cuba, from Spain. Again, I told you yesterday, some of you, that we have the biggest group of works from Spain, and the biggest group of the museum is painting, the biggest sort of group of works from France, Mexico, Panama, Poland. Beautiful, amazing experimental pieces of abstract art from Poland. Sweden, we have kinetic sculpture. We have the biggest kinetic sculpture group of Chile, and I would say probably of the Southern Cone. Algeria, Bulgaria, Mongolia, that donated through Cuba and then to Chile in democracy. And just to give you a quick look at this MIRSA, this Museum of Resistance, that was plural, nomadic, didn't have any walls of its own. At the first stage, it was a decentralized organization. At the second stage, it was even more. It was just networks of solidarity supported on trust, on friendship, on complicity and mutual interests between prominent personalities from the political and artistic field, but also civil, governmental, union, friends, artist organizations that validated the call to donate works of the symbolic relevance of this project through their participation. This is how this solidarity model of donations of artistic works in support of other social causes such as Palestine, Nicaragua, and South Africa began to be replicated during the 70s and 80s because our history unites us with Palestine, in whose support the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and cultural agents organized an exhibition in Beirut, in Lebanon, in 1978. Many artists that donated for our museum in the 2 phases that I've mentioned, they donated to the Palestinian Liberation Organization exhibition afterwards. So I would never think I would be giving a talk in this context of such an awful repetition of the history, the need of this endless occupation and genocide to stop. But also I would think that in this context of another Solidarity Museum, I think a question arises today because the donations of the collection of the Skopje Museum were done in 1964, if I'm not wrong. And that is 7 years before the Museum of Solidarity. So I wonder whether that was the spirit of the time, which is also very possible. We discussed it. But also I wonder which of these artist unions were then being more aware that there were artistic solidarity projects going around, and there was a socialist spirit and gatherings all around the world. I wonder maybe who was the model for the PLO exhibition. That's what I'm saying. Maybe it was the Skopje. Maybe it doesn't matter, but I think it's interesting that we don't know where this starts. And I, of course, know of the other Montenegro, the Crni Gorac collection for Solidarity, which is slightly different, but still. So they gathered in these various parallel exhibitions that were moving, for example, in France and Spain, the countries that had the most exhibitions during that time. They were moving from Lyon to the municipality building. So they went to Nanterre, and that's when the Yugoslavian donation came in. And I've got the names, and I know some of them are really big names. I didn't include them particularly here, but of course we've discussed them with my colleagues here, and I was in Croatia a couple of days ago, and I'm doing that research because I know they belong to some public collections here. I'm very glad to know more about that, because we only have a document that states that they were donating to Nanterre through an airplane. That there's nothing, absolutely no information. And it's difficult, as we were thinking, and we were talking with Ivana, to research when you actually don't know the context. It's donated through different countries, so all the documents are in French, so they were not, it's various layers of information, and you end up finally coming back to asking humans rather than the internet or the artificial intelligence to help you. You actually turned back to people. So these are part of the works of the democracy period, very important names from Chile. Juan Pablo Langlois, that I would say in a brief summary, maybe he's the father of conceptual art in Chile. He died very recently. Virginia Rasuri's amazing, this series of this disappeared. She has a very important series of the disappeared bodies in Chile. We're now at the point of asking for another small donation of this series. Teresa Margolles, a very local situated project that she did with us a few years ago, all of which has led us to have a vast archive, and I would definitely invite you to maybe have a go and looking at the files. We have beautiful donation sheets, donation files such as yours. They're incredibly great and rich because they express the reasons for the artist to donate. So I don't know, we have the Jacques Monorian as for the liberty of the world, for the freedom of expression. And another one said, why not? I mean, how come I not donate to this beautiful museum? And another one made a drawing of, what the work would look like, but it ended up looking something very, very different. So they are absolutely outstanding documents, and I think there is vast, information there to research. I definitely invite you to come over or to dig in the internet if not possible. So the museum came back. All the collections gathered in France and in Cuba, and the museum, with a lot of support of international governments, and I think France was the main one, came back in several crates. And in 1991, after the recovery of democracy and the institutionalization of neoliberalism, extreme, one of the most successful in South America, we need to say. And so the concept of solidarity, of course, is still there. It's very relevant. We say that we operate in the axis of art and politics, which basically can be everything, but also arts and fraternity, which for me is very problematic because frater means brother, in Latin. And of course, it's two men. For me, I would say that we rather need to operate in, sorority, or maybe there's words that I think we're looking into. But since 2005, we have been operating in the house of this República. This is a big name of a big avenue neighborhood, a bourgeois neighborhood, full of houses such as the one I showed you at the beginning that gives us our home. These houses were first bourgeois and oligarchy neighborhood. Then they were embassies, more or less, around the 1960s. Then some of them became the University of Chile, I would say the most prestigious university, public of Chile, that the dictatorship tried to dismantle, of course. And then all the neighborhood was taken by the military police, by the military intelligence, which is maybe an oxymoron, police in the dictatorship. So they were, our house was the headquarters of the telephonic spying center of Chile, of the military, the DINA, and then the CNI, the CNI police. So quite harsh and quite charged. So we've had to deal with that awful energy. This, neighborhood being called the Triangle of the Bermuda Triangle. So nobody wanted to walk on the pavement. They crossed the street. So we've been working really hard to one, point this as sites of memory where we know people were tortured, were killed. They made them rehearse their own deaths. And also, we have been working really hard to regain the lively spirit of this project, connected to the neighborhood and to the necessities of the neighborhood today, right? Because we operate, I mean, art is political in the sense that it represents and it speaks to a singular time, to the present time, but also that it affects people that are alive today, of course, that, you know, kids, elders, people. So we started very slowly and organically this mirada de barrio, so very roughly translated, gaze of the neighborhood or gaze to the neighborhood. So we started thinking locally. We did have, of course, we still had an international program. We were working with a collection. We never stopped doing those things, but we worked with the neighborhood. And I mean, we started knocking at the doors. I did that myself. The director did that herself. Everybody went out on like literally brigades of like almost, you know, to introduce ourselves. Hi, I'm Daniela Berger. I'm the curator of the museum. Do you know that house is a museum? Oh, no, I didn't know. When? Since when? Oh, 15 years ago. No idea. Nobody knew us. Nobody knew us. So we thought that was important. We thought the neighbors and everybody should know our names, and we should know our names, their names. I don't mean 100,000 people. We should know the lady, the guy where I buy the wine for the events or the lunch, as here as in every place. We needed to know their names, and we ended up knowing. So that's Tania Garcia, so that's Dani Berger, so that's Claudia, that's Carla Ansaldi, that's Don Lito. He was being tortured in that building. He told us all his story and his family's story. They came from the countryside. We needed to know the people that were actually walking in front of us every day. It was important to become a member of the neighborhood, to build trust, as you say in English. So this is an ongoing methodology. This restructured the museum's gaze towards itself, I would say. This changed everything. And it's, of course, based on critical museology and the Teatro del Oprimido, Paulo Freire, and all those sort of Teología de la Liberación ideas, which we take very seriously and that we all read and that we all sort of took place and took time to acknowledge it. It was very demanding, but also it was very positive, I would say. So we ended up in the joint design, in Spanish you say co-creación, co-diseño, the co-design of a series of actions. And these actions were divided into 3 brigades. The garden school, which is lasting today, and it converted into a comedor popular, a soup kitchen. I'll talk about it a little bit later. The brigade of photography that then sort of vanished in time, but it lasted for at least 5 years. And then the textile collective, the textile brigade, which today has a name and it's called Textileras, because it's a feminist, just women, although men are invited, of course, a collective that has to do, with textile works and in resonance or not with pieces of our collection. So this is one activity in the garden school, and then on the right side you see how we use our front garden as a square, as a piazza, you would say in Italian, because this neighborhood, although has many beautiful, really old trees, it doesn't have a lot of squares, and we needed places to gather. We needed places to actually build trust. You don't want to be talking in a museum's room all the time. You want to be sitting in a garden, having lunch, having a beer, like really enjoying with relaxing time to get to know your neighbor, your director of the museum, whatever the curators. And just to give you some aspects very, very briefly about our contemporary art program that we work beyond the collection, I'll just show you very briefly these works of the exhibition Muros Blandos, Ser Entre Bordes, Soft Walls Being Between Borders, that we curated with Mette Kjærgaard from Denmark and Lily Hall from the UK several years ago, looking at the pedagogy of the oppressed Paulo Freire and thinking about the mutable and questioning about sort of the mutable conditions of the categories of nation, race, and gender, which is a lot. And we were like thinking of the works that transited fluid context, that sort of undermine univocal and binomial concepts. This was in the context of Chile undergoing the biggest migration wave that we've seen in the last maybe 20 years. At the moment, that was people from Haiti. Today, it's been people much recently from Venezuela and Colombia. And so Chile actually, from this year on, transformed completely. On the right-hand side, you're seeing the work of Pia Arke, a Greenlandic Danish artist who defines herself as a bastard artist. She's nor Greenlandic nor Danish. She was the first woman from a Greenlandic background to study formal arts in Denmark, in Copenhagen. She did photo performance and a photo practice really critical that sort of looks back at the gaze of the conqueror, the Danish invader. So we thought it was quite amazing. She wasn't very much known at the time. So we found her works, we researched her and worked with her family because she was deceased already. We invited Vladimir Tomic, of course you might know him, we didn't. So we sort of came across this seminal work of Flotel Europa, and I think this was the first time he showed it in Latin America. I wanted to show you Seba Calfuqueo, an artist that now it's kind of showing a lot internationally, but at the time he wasn't. Today he's a non-binary queer Mapuche indigenous artist who exhibited several works in the exhibition. Maybe he was the one that exhibited more. And on the right-hand side, you can see the frame of the video work, You Will Never Be a Weye, which touches on the taboo subject of the non-binary sexuality of the Weyes, Mapuche shamans, with a long tradition of non-binary sexuality, but branded by the patriarchal culture of both the Mapuche and the Chilean, saying, in the Mapuche culture, there are no faggots. This is a quote from the artist, of course. On the left-hand side, in Mapudungu, the language of the Mapuche indigenous, you can see Apungenyi in the floor, written with hair. This is several different types of hair that he collected. You can see the horses there. The horse is the symbol of the invader, as it is in many cultures, of course. And for the Mapuche, Apungenyi means they want, they defeat us. They defeat us. They won. They sort of, nos derrotaron. It's very strong, I would say. That's one of his seminal pieces in the exhibition. We have been in contact since, but yeah. And this, so to say, we work with different collectives. You might know the Chicano collective ASCO, who were rejected by LACMA in 1971, and then LACMA was the first museum that did a big retrospective about them, very curious, I would say. And then the Colectivo Charco in Chile that put for the first time the socio-natural disasters, and I say socio-natural because the disasters in Chile sometimes happen, all the ecological disasters sometimes happen as a result of the abandonment, really, and the lack of planning of the Chilean state through the cities and through the valleys and the geography of this long and thin country. And at the right hand is Mujeres Creando, a feminist collective of working women. They don't define themselves as artists, with this miraculous blasphemous altar that has the Virgin of the Ovaries, and that we were praying to her that we had the law of abortion approved because we were thinking about that at the time in Chile, and the law was approved actually. And after that exhibition, we started translating all the texts of the museum, and I know maybe this is more common in this region, but for us, it was not a question before. We maybe just translated them to English, but we started thinking, if we are having so many people from Haiti come, they don't speak Spanish, they speak Creole. It's a very different language that, of course, it has a lot of French in it, but it's not. So, sorry. And then of Mapudungu. So if we are working with Mapuche artists, we need to have the text in their language. So we thought it's a minimal gesture. We're not inventing the wheel, of course, but we thought it was very important. And we, since then, have been doing it. Of course, the works of Teresa Margolles, who dealt with the normalization of violence and inequality in Chile. I think that's a very simple way to summarize it. Teresa was absolutely outraged with the amount of capitalism and examples of extreme neoliberalism that she saw around Santiago. She traveled around Santiago, she went to the north to various communities, so she did get to see the country, and she was completely absorbed by this. I mean, she created a whole new series of works in Chile after this. So this is La Huella, the Trace, which was done with a community of Haitian migrants, and all of them now migrated after the corona, to Canada. We know we lost all the sort of touch and community and communication that we have with them, because the corona economy, of course, in every part of the world was really radically affecting us, them, everybody. So just to show you that we opened Teresa Margolles exhibition, and 10 days before, I think 7 days after, the social uprising happened. So what she saw, she smelled, she sort of looked at the temperature, she felt that this inequality was going to explode. She literally spoke about it with me. And so I remember, I mean, this is just an anecdote, but I remember having her call me and writing on WhatsApp, like, Daniela, I want to go back. And I was like, Teresa, they burned your hotel. There's no place you come back to. I mean, and we needed this. Chile despertó means Chile is awakened. Chile awoke. I don't know. No more abuses. It says on the left. Like, and that's the Mapuche flag in the other slide, in the other image that you will see in a square. I will show you later. It was called Plaza Italia, so Italian Square, and now it's called, or being mentioned as, so symbolically mentioned as Plaza Dignidad, so Dignity Square. So it was a protest to regain our dignity, basically. And the museum couldn't be a way of this process. We just couldn't go on like showing our collections from, Bulgaria and Argelia without looking at this, and connecting with this also very important, also solidarity movement that was actually happening. Solidarity maybe, or looking for a new meaning of solidarity amongst ourselves in a country that was actually alienating. So Renace means, on the left-hand side, you see Renace and the Mapuche star. I don't know if you remember it, Boyana, by Cristian Inostroza's installation in Ljubljana. So rebirth. The country was, wanting to be rebirthed, wanting to be awakened. But when you awake, you need to remember. So we closed the museum, we closed the exhibitions. And we said, okay, let's have cabildo. Cabildo is a colonial word for meeting. They were held by the Chilean government, in 1810, when the country was first founded as an independent republic from Spain. And I say independent because, of course, Spanish corporations own half of the country still. So these were meetings held at MSSA during October, November. And if you remember, for Chile, the social uprising was absolutely radical, a big change and a big point in our history that I don't think we are still able to fully grasp, but we are, of course, thinking about it. But what I was going to say is that it was really affected by the COVID, by the corona, because corona came just after. So it was a big interruption of this process. And so we went to closing the museum for this social uprising, to closing the museum for another reason 2 months after, for the social uprising. And then the social uprising meant a lot of economic problems for most of the society in Chile. Such an unequal and informal, full of informal jobs society was really undergoing through complex problems. So this is the Comedor Popular Margarita Ancacoy. Margarita Ancacoy was an indigenous woman that was murdered 2 blocks away from the museum. They wanted their mobile phone. They robbed her for that reason, and she was killed. And there was an organization in the neighborhood with whom now we had a strong relationship, that were looking for a house, to actually do what they were doing, which is making this popular soup kitchen. And invited us to work in the museum because we were not having exhibitions. So they would start, and they would never stop giving actual food, which is, you can say it's charity. No, it's not charity. It's kelubun. It's a word, a Mapuche word, that means actually taking care of others is taking care of me. Like, we are all one, and it's not hippie, it's not new age, it's kelubun, it's Mapuche, it's very serious, it's a social responsibility. And we thought this concept really touched us upon our sort of functional foundational values, but also the current values of the museum and its collection. So Margarita Ancacoy, popular dining or popular soup kitchen, which is the translation, stayed for us with us until now. We have a very close relationship. They're really activists on what they do. And just to show you a little reflection on the collection at the time, again, we had to stop this opening. So I said 2020, 2022, because we closed this exhibition. And of course, we got tremendous, not inspiration, I don't like that word, but we were affected, of course, by the social uprising. We participated, we protested, we, went together to many different gatherings and stuff. And of course, we ended up as a country voting against changing Pinochet's constitution. So we now remain, after 5 years of social uprising, the same constitution that the Pinochet dictator did in 1980. So that's also very heavy to explain and to understand. Even for me as a Chilean, it's a burden. And so at the time, we decided that we had to sort of express this, I wouldn't say revolution, because again, that's a big word, but things were happening. The world was red. I mean, the world was burning. Chile, Santiago, everybody was burning. And burning also in, in rage and in reflection, and also in hope, which is something that neoliberalism doesn't leave any space for. We had hope for some time, and it was quite pretty. Some works and some gestures. Like here is Ivana, if you see Joan Rabascal. That's the May 1968 piece, and that's literally a sister piece of the one over here. This gives me the goosebumps a little bit, because May 68 was another moment of the world when, people were actually not only revolutionary thinking, but rethinking things. And I think that's what matters, to rethink relations and concepts and maybe situate them amongst your knowledges, right? So this Rojo exhibition, rather than looking at the normal, of course, the logic associations that one would do with the leftist, socialist projects, the utopian projects, we wanted to look at the Brazilian artist, the conceptual Brazilian artist, Antonio Dias, that of course was very close with Mário Pedrosa. And he said a beautiful text in the interview that we did to him in 2012. I wasn't part of the museum, so my colleague knew about this. And I quote, he wanted to symbolize he donated a flag. There's a huge red flag in our facade all the time, like with the wind, it's really beautiful. So we wanted to symbolize renewal rather than only, leftist revolution, socialism, utopias, and so on and so forth. We wanted to show a force that can actually awaken and change life. Also, you can see, I don't know if you recognize at the back right, that's Corrado Cagli, and you also have him in your collection. He's an Italian painter. Really strange, this organic form, and at the center is one of these kinetic works by the Swedish artist Leif Worter. Very pop, very kinetic, strange, sort of inspired in nature and in science. A very amazing artist that's now in his late 80s, and we had the possibility of interviewing him by phone, really, just like he wouldn't take as a Zoom. And you see the Dignity Square. So the museum was red and the outside world was also red. This square was changing colors every day. And most of the time it had red painting, that Dignity Square that you see. I wanted to show very briefly this exhibition curated by somebody that maybe now I can call a friend, also a colleague, Iranian curator Sohrab Mohebi. I just want to mention the title. I think it's so clever because it's very subtle. It's a Maya Kakchikel indigenous saying. They don't say hello. They don't say dobro večer or do viđenja they don't say dobar dan. They say, is it morning for you yet? So have you awakened? Because I'm awoke. Or how are you? Because I'm fine. It's many questions in one single question. And I thought, he wanted to look at the influence meaning the invasion, really, or the attack of the United States in the internationalism of the 40s and 50s in all the world, really. So to trace that within the United States, I thought it was quite a brave gesture, and I think he kind of acquainted it, And the title was nailed it. I thought it was, very, very, very simple in a way. Thinking about other people's feelings, the affections that many times we live outside the museums. I thought it was important to put again inside. And this is again the last year exhibition, a charged one because it was the 50th anniversary of the coup d'etat. It was the year that we decided to work with Tania Bruguera, speaking of democracy and human rights. It was a very difficult exhibition. It was the urgency of the present and looking at the memory through the collection, and she was responding to that. It was also when we find out as a country, as a society, that none of the wounds of dictatorship were healed, that the country was very much divided into left and right, that the opinions haven't modified, that the people that denied the disappeared bodies are still denying them. So it was almost at once that we voted for the constitution of Pinochet. So I need to say, and this has been, very self-critical, that it was a horrible year for Chile. We didn't nail it. We just didn't. I think there was a lot of cancellation. I think that maybe is a global phenomenon, but there's a lot of cancellation and a lot of lack of deep reflection and sort of lack of solidarity among ourselves. So I think we as a team also, because of course a museum is a group of people, not a group of walls only, we were absolutely devastated. And I know all of you might have experienced this before. So we needed to stop. I'm showing some sculptures of the energies that we wanted to evoke in a way. Yoko Ono, this beautiful white piece, part of our collection. So this year, 2024, we decided to move towards happier ideas. So we decided to look onto Mario Pedrosa's first amazing letters with correspondency with Salvador Allende and the replies to Salvador Allende and the first speeches. And we decided we had already been experiencing with color. You remember the red exhibition, Cuerpo Escultura, body sculpture was all pink and we tend to look at those colors as childish, as related to the kids. No, it was very colorful, but it was a different way of putting color because it was a charged color. It was a way of also maybe even evading this, year of the 50th anniversary. But this was like, we're going to bond together a little bit. We're going to stop. We're going to do one long exhibition rather than 1,000 small ones. We're going to look into our collection. That collection is going to take all the building again, which is something that didn't happen since 2020 with the red exhibition. And we decided, and I'm not sure about the name, I didn't vote for this one, but we decided to name it Happy Ideas Are Like This, which is a quote of Mario Pedrosa that I will read very shortly. So this is a MSSA, a collectively curated exhibition in progress. We curated this with the guards of the rooms, with the administrative department, with the archive department, the education. We don't call it education, we call it public programs, with the editions department. And when I say department, I mean 2 people, right? So we're just 2 curators, the director. Everybody was installing. Of course, we have art handlers, conservators, but everybody was thinking about the works, selecting the works, writing the texts, which of course sounds very fun, but it's also very slow and very difficult. Very difficult. We had many discussions and some of them turned into arguments, strong ones. That work has nothing to do with it. Let's do this, let's do that. It's difficult, but we were having a good time while we did it. And I think that was very important for us. We didn't want to invite, at this moment, a huge artist. We didn't invite nothing international for a little while. We just wanted to take our time. And of course, the international program is still going on. It will happen in a few months. We have another contemporary art exhibition, but we thought this was important to sit down and ask about the topics of caring, of stopping, of sharing, which is what you do at a table, right? When you share a table at a restaurant or in somebody's home, you know who they are sitting, you know the names, you slow down, you listen to the stories, you say salut, živela, zdravlje. You take your time to actually enjoy, you slow down. In a table, you're not running, you can't run on the table. You're sitting down. And I think that's very important part of what we wanted to do. So maybe that's the table part of the title. That is actually not my title. It's part of the curatorial text that says, for example, we are all part of a garden of a forest. Happy ideas are like this. Who does not recognize themselves in the leaves? Who has never been touched by the sunlight? Ooh, what a poem, you will say. But we agreed of just saying that. We wanted a lyric poem to be our curatorial text rather than having very historical text that we always used to have, pointing, this donation came from Algeria. This was donated through in the second period, in the second phase with this president, very historical. History is part of poetry as well. You can absolutely be very contemporary whilst not pointing to the seminal text that we always quote. So this is more an exhibition of desires and not of certainties. We don't pretend to do anything. We're just looking at the amazing collection that we have, enjoying ourselves, something that we didn't do for many, many times. We looked at, of course, exhibition designs that represented this organicity, the organic, any squares. We leave the squares and the rectangles for the works of art. We have a beautiful corpus of art, of abstract works, of experimental works, and there is also Calder up there, as you can see, this painting of the sun and the moon kind of opening this playground, this political playground. That's the whole. This is the whole of the museum inside, and so I would say that it's also an exhibition that looks about the ideas of caring, of listening. What is being a tree? A tree and going around a tree is to stop, to look at the flowers, maybe, to look at the fruits. So you need to, again, to stop, to observe, to listen. Have you listened to a tree? It's important. And in whatever space or form, to have a connection with a tree or with a table, with humans, is to sign sort of an agreement, a pact of affection, of care and codependence. To be a forest, a group of trees, to sustain each other in order to live. And here's the quote, and I'm about to finish, don't worry. Happy ideas are like that. They're born neither before nor after, but with the sign of history, wrote Mario Pedrosa to Salvador Allende in 1972 to express the spirit of this open and experimental museum. So we collectively decided to pause and to imagine an exhibition sort of looking at these words with our works from the collection of what we wanted to be, a living organism in constant movement. So can a museum be a part of an ecosystem? Can we be a tree or a forest? And in the second floor, very briefly, I will show you how we put some works growing down the window, like plants, coming in the museum. Up there, there's a window, you barely see it. It's not a good image, probably. And then you can see the very political arpilleras, also connected with different, more abstract works. And then on the second floor, very quickly, just to show you that we invited the communities that we now have and that collaborate with us permanently to curate the spaces. Because this is a house, the second floor has rooms. Like literally, you can actually understand the main room, like the corridor, the hall, the bathroom probably, which is a smaller room. And so this was dedicated to the University Diego Portales, who is a neighbor university 2 blocks away. So they curated this exhibition in response to some works of our collection. At the back, the big Statue of Liberty work, let's say, is Jacques Monory from France. And this is, curated by Marjorie Waiki, a Mapuche pedagogy advisor. She's also a neighbor. She's in charge of we say kindergarten, like a daycare place of the neighborhood. So she's our advisor, mixing Waldorf and Mapuche indigenous methodologies for a non-adultocentric narrative and a non-adultocentric room. And if you see at the back, that bowl, you see, it's a dish from Picasso that he didn't donate himself. It was a collector. And so you see that we forced to lower the room with these pieces of cloth, a gesture that we've already done in the hall. And over there, the same room curated for infants. So infants and memory and political works are absolutely together. And this is the room of the soup kitchen. They curated this room. What you see at the left are the paper or the cardboard trays where you serve, takeaway food. So in each of them has a desire written by them. And they took 2 works from our collection, the ones that you see at the back. You see at the left-hand side an arpillera, and arpilleras are textile works that were very popular during the dictatorship. They were made by anonymous women, basically looking for their husband, kids, and partners, etc. And they were sold in order to gather money for the resistance. They were sent to Europe, exhibited in different exhibitions, of course, very popular during the resistance. And then the other piece, as you can see, shows a piece of bread, a Chilean bread that is called marraqueta. And it's called, like, when you have a marraqueta, you survive. Like one marraqueta a day, you can survive or something. Every aspect of the museum design was sort of circular in a way, organic. And this is the textile I was mentioning, the textile collective, that also gather around the ideas of Kelewun, of collaboration, of doing textile works. This is not a very good image because they have such many more works, but just to show you this one and the ways that they were working within the room while we were opening the show. And just to finish, one of their sayings of the Comedor Popular, of the soup kitchen, is cooking and planting, another way of fighting. And just to finish, comment that we, with this exhibition, but always with our practice, intend and try to be situated, to act, to enact, to collectivize, which is probably not a verb, but I want to use it, collectivize, to make collective, to work together, and to live in this very complex moment of Chile that urgently needs a response to its social demands, of this Chile that awoke in 2019 and that voted no to change the constitution, because when one awakes, one must remember to write down the dreams so that they are not forgotten. Voila. Thank you. Gracias.
Well, thank you. Thank you really, Daniela, for this inspiring lecture. It really means a lot, I think, for basically for the things that we're doing here at the museum, especially for the exhibition that I announced for November. And before I open the floor for Q&A, I just want to greet Bojana Piškur, curator from Moderna Galeria from Ljubljana, that's here with us tonight. And because of her, I know Daniela and I know the Museum of Solidarity in the Chile. Yes. So she is the connecting thread for both of us. And yes, thank you, Bojana, for connecting us. I really liked your lecture because somehow you situate the museum in the context of these museums of solidarity, and somehow like not only mentioning solidarity like as a buzzword in the art world, but somehow like really kind of gives an extra note, an extra identity to this museum in the sense that there is a group of museums of solidarity that were kind of created for a specific reason. And although like the Museum of Contemporary Art here in Skopje has a huge, bigger collection, maybe like 2,000, now it's like 5,000 works plus. Still, for example, what's the difference between your museum is that somehow I think that the Salvador Allende had one idea particular, and this is for the Chilean people and somehow the people that believed this socialist ideal, whereas this museum was somehow built around the donations to the city of Skopje after the Skopje earthquake. So somehow, ideologically, it has different kind of starting maybe ideas, but yes, definitely they are part of the Museums of Solidarity. And I thank you for mentioning this collectively curated exhibition in progress, because I think that that's what we are doing with the exhibition in November. Does anybody from the audience has a question for Daniela?
Or a comment?
Or a comment? Yes.
Thank you very much. The presentation was very, very, very interesting. Sorry for my voice, it's non-existent in this moment. I wanted to ask you, first, you said the museum is today is still a state museum, or who are the founding institutions of the museum?
Okay.
I'll ask this, and then I have another question, but I will go later.
So this will probably sound as a contradiction and like for me being very cynic, but I would say that we are very lucky that we are not a public museum. And you know what I mean. What I mean is that we are a mixed museum. We are a non-for-profit foundation. That means we can get donations from all over the world, not from Chile as well, from private people, like one person or an institution or a company. Of course, companies in Chile with their Salvador Allende surname, they don't like us very much. But we are a private non-for-profit foundation, and we also receive the basis of our functioning from the state. So we are a very close collaborator of the state, but we do not belong to the state as an organization. But the collection is fully public, of course. Yeah.
Thank you. And I also wanted to ask about the last exhibition that you mentioned, because you mentioned that there were collectives curating. Also, you said that the guards were involved, and the people who were working in the museum were involved, not just the curators. And I find this really, really interesting and exciting. And I wanted to ask you, what is the limit of the control, let's say, of the curator when these people and these groups come in? Where the control of the curator reaches.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. First of all, they just to clarify, they didn't come in for this exhibition, and that's important. And I would advise, if anyone wants to be crazy enough and stubborn enough to make something like this happen, because it wasn't easy, to actually build on the trust a long time before you do the show, because otherwise it wouldn't have worked this way. Really, it was easy in terms of difficulties that were, affordable. Do you know what I mean? We never had a problem with them because we know them for 7 years now. And I mean them, for example, the University Diego Portales. The head of the Faculty of Arts is a very clever, amazing curator that I admire. She's now the head of the faculty. So, we built this trust for 5 years collaborating. She even, loans us the theater to do a projection. We might do the Cinema Palestine thing next month, so build on trust. So they didn't come for this. They've been very close to us for many, many years. And then is how, I would say, this is like the continuation of this methodology that I talked about, mirada de barrio, the gaze to the neighborhood thing. So, yeah, and the textileras, they work every week in the museum, every week. So they are part of the museum as well. We know everybody, we know their homes, they know art, so it was easy in a way, it was easy going. But of course it was complex. And the way to control, which is a word that fortunately never came up in the conversation, we invited them. And when you do an invitation, you can make it focused or open. And we said, do you want this space or do you want this other? Maybe we think that for you, this spaces would be better because of this or that reason. And they were like, yeah, okay, no, we want the other. Okay, perfect. We would like you, and this is the invitation, we would like you to have a dialogue with anything of the collection. Does that make sense to you? And all of them replied, you know what? Yes. For example, the soup kitchen, they had the least experience with works of art. Like they come from the activist world and the food world, the orchard, the garden, right? So of course they're doing activities in the garden, the front yard, and they selected 2 pieces of works of art, which I think is very coherent. We wouldn't ask for more, and the room is small, as you can more or less see. So that was fine. We did this, do you see at the right-hand side, the timetable? Is it you say timetable? No. Línea de tiempo? Yeah. Timeline. So we kind of helped, we advised, we had conversations, but it was all a dialogue. We didn't impose anything. And of course, they would have said, you know what? It doesn't make sense for us to have any piece of your collection. It would have been fine. But that was the way we made the invitation. So, yeah, I hope I answered.
Yes, you did. Thank you very much.
Because you said at the beginning that basically the museum, the collection is built only upon works that are donated to the museum. Mm-hmm. The only donation, you don't acquire, don't acquisition, right? You don't have basically the funds to, yeah. But, and how do you, what's your strategy actually? How do you deal with maybe there are offers from artists to donate works to the museum and everything, and there are a lot of artists that are willing to do that. So how is your strategy actually? How you deal with it?
Yeah, that's also very interesting, because one problem that we have in that sense is that some people think that we are a museum of memory and human rights. And we are not. We are a museum of modern and contemporary art that was created during the period of Salvador Allende. Of course, we are political, definitely, because of our origins and all I've explained. But we are not a museum that only focuses on art or images of, for example, the disappeared, los desaparecidos, or just talk about the Chilean dictatorship and torture and so forth. So we are a museum of modern and contemporary art. So we have a committee, acquisition committee, which actually should be a donation committee that is now formed only by people in the museum. Like it's 5 of us, the conservator-in-chief, the director, the head of the collection, me, and the register. So it's 5 people. And we meet 3 times a year. And to accept a donation, we must have majority of votes. We vote literally like up or down. Seriously. And it's very democratic. The director doesn't get to say what we accept. She's very democratic in that sense. Of course, she can push, but it's democracy. And of course, we look for donations. So for example, what void do we have? We have the void of what? All the solidarity of maybe all the museums in the world. We have only 18% representation of female figures, female artists in our collection. So what am I looking? And I consider myself a feminist, and of course that opened many questions, but that was one of my major issues when I came to the museum. We need to show more women, like not only of the collection, we need to research more women. They're not researched enough. And of course, as a consequence of that, they're not shown enough. So we're looking for more women's art, of course, quality, etc., current topics. And another thing that was absolutely absent, in my opinion, in my gaze, it's indigenous cultures where, I mean, when I came to the museum 8 years ago, and I'm not saying it's my merit, it's a collective change of thought, of course, after 2019, after many things, and I think it's a worldwide thing, there was only one piece of Chilean indigenous, one piece. And that is outrageous because we have amazing Mapuche, indigenous, Aymara descent artists. And so now we have many, many more. And Valeria Monti is also she's representing Chile in the Venice Biennale at the moment. She's the daughter of exiled people in Sweden. She was not born in Chile. And she is of Aymara indigenous descent. So the indigenous from the north, from the desert, very colorful. Clothes and stuff, and she uses that imagery, and she's representing Chile now. So I think the whole country has sort of recognized the indigenous more, and we had to do so in the collection, definitely. So I think we're looking into those topics. Also, the non-binary, the queer, that's also very much more included than I would say 5 years ago. So that's how we do it, yeah. And ideally, in the future, what we would like to happen, or maybe this is me saying what I would like to happen, I would like to have international or national advisors that were not working in the museum, that maybe we would consult on particular topics. So like experts or, or friends, you can say. Yeah.
Does anybody else have a comment or a question or a suggestion or anything?
Or an advice?
Or an advice. Well, then I'm going to close up here. Thank you, Daniela, again for being here with us.
I cannot close this talk without saying that I really owe Ivana one great experience that has marked me forever, really. Thank you so much for bringing me over to Macedonia, to Skopje. I am very much enjoying this experience and this museum. And I'm going to, of course, continue this amazing conversation with Ivana and Vladimir and everybody. And I also want to thank our dear colleague, Bojana, who is herself maybe the spirit of these solidarities, connections, and dialogues.
I agree.
I think she's become the non-aligned person herself, the non-aligned movement herself. No, but thank you so much, Bojana, because really, I'm coming from Croatia, I need to mention, and it's also a connection from a Ljubljana exhibition I did last year. I collaborated with Bojana and Shada Safadi and Riksa Afiati. So yeah. Thank you. Hvala.
Thank you.